August 7, 1951. Ministry of Supply Building, Whitehall, London. The grandfather clock in the corner ticks toward noon as Captain Dennis Royal Farquharson Cambell sits alone at his desk, staring at a 3-foot model of HMS Illustrious. His sandwich lunch sits abandoned, growing stale beside a scatter of rejected sketches. In 2 hours, he must chair a meeting about the Royal Navy's latest obsession, the flexible deck scheme, a rubber mat system designed to let aircraft land without undercarriages. But Cambell knows it's doomed. For 26 years, since his first carrier landing in a ferry flycatcher aboard HMS Glorious in 1931, Cambell has lived the evolution of deck landing. He survived the war, commanded 803 Squadron flying Blackburn Skuas, shot down the first German aircraft of World War II. He knows carriers. And he knows the rubber deck won't work. How do you handle aircraft without wheels when they divert to shore bases? What happens in combat? The scientists at Farnborough have proven the concept works in tests, but Cambell sees the operational nightmare it creates. His pencil moves across paper, sketching desperate solutions. Put the whole rubber deck on stilts with parking below. Ridiculous. Try other arrangements. Nothing works. The problem isn't the landing surface, it's the entire concept of carrier operations. With jets growing heavier and faster, the traditional straight deck forces a terrible choice: sacrifice speed of operations or risk catastrophic crashes. Then, right out of the blue, it comes to him. Why not angle the deck about 10 degrees to port? His hand freezes. The idea seems simultaneously obvious and revolutionary. An angled landing area would let you keep the deck park forward. No barrier needed except for emergencies. Aircraft could even launch from catapults while others landed on the angle. And if a pilot missed all the arrestor wires, he wouldn't slam into parked aircraft. He'd overshoot, go around, try again. Cambell's pulse quickens. He grabs a fresh sheet, sketching rapidly. This solves everything. Not just the rubber deck problem, this changes the fundamental nature of carrier aviation. He checks his watch. 2 hours until the meeting. The afternoon meeting begins at 2 o'clock sharp. Around the table sit representatives from the Naval Air Division at the Royal Aircraft Establishment, ministry officials, and naval officers. Cambell chairs the session, his large sketch hidden beneath routine paperwork. The discussion follows its predictable course: how to install the flexible deck on the new carriers, how to maneuver wheelless aircraft after landing, where to store the elaborate trolleying equipment. Cambell lets the meeting unfold. He knows what he must do: demonstrate that the paramount need is retaining the deck park. Only when it becomes painfully clear that no simple solution exists does he reach for his sketch. With something of a flourish, he presents the large drawing showing the rubber mat and 4 arrestor wires offset 10 degrees to port. The reaction stuns him. No gasps of amazement, no excited questions. Instead, the room fills with apathy and mild derision. Officers exchange skeptical glances. Someone mutters about impracticality. The rubber deck program has consumed years of effort, millions of pounds. No one wants to hear that a simple angle might solve problems they've ignored. But one man leans forward. Louis Boddington, the civilian technical officer in charge of the Naval Air Division at Farnborough, who's been conducting the entire flexible deck program. After the meeting closes, he asks to take another look at the sketch. Cambell watches as Boddington's pencil moves across the paper, adding a few lines showing how the port-forward corner of the angled deck could be fared into the main deck edge. A small point, but it lodges in Cambell's memory. The meeting adjourns. Cambell returns to his desk, deflated, but not defeated. He's experienced enough to know that good ideas often face resistance. The rubber deck represents too much invested effort, too many reputations. but he's also experienced enough to recognize that Louis Boddington understood something the others missed. The scientist saw past the immediate problem to the larger solution. In Boddington, Cambell has found an unexpected ally. 3 weeks later, everything changes. Louis Boddington has been wrestling with his own problem: how to design the flight deck for the new carrier HMS Royal. Her sister ship Eagle carries 16 arrestor wires and 3 different types of barriers just to cope with the first generation of straight-wing jets. No way would such a layout handle the newer, faster swept-wing aircraft entering service. On August 28, 1951, Boddington writes to the Deputy Director of Naval Construction, Mr. Bartlett, with a copy to Cambell. Enclosed is a detailed drawing of the angled deck applied to Royal's design. The reversal of roles strikes Cambell as curious, the experienced carrier pilot dreaming up radical theory while the scientist proposes its practical application. But together, their ideas point toward revolution. The immediate effect is clear. The angled deck would allow aircraft of much higher performance and weight to operate from carriers. By clearing all obstructions, barriers, deck parks, maintenance equipment, from the landing path, aircraft that overshot could safely go around and try again. The rubber deck scheme quietly fades into the background. Cambell helps deliver the final blow by writing a tongue-in-cheek dialogue highlighting its impracticality and irrelevance, giving it selective circulation. Now comes the harder task: selling the idea to the Board of Admiralty. Fortune provides an opportunity. The biennial Farnborough Air Show takes place in early September. Among the American visitors is a delegation of U.S. Navy officers headed by Vice Admiral Thomas Combs. As courtesy dictates, a small informal meeting is arranged at the Admiralty to exchange ideas on future developments. During the meeting, Cambell mentions the angled deck proposal almost casually. The Americans' reaction differs dramatically from that first ministry meeting. They say very little, but Cambell clearly recalls them exchanging significant looks. A few weeks later, word arrives from Washington. The U.S. Navy is already planning to angle the flight deck of the carrier USS Midway for preliminary trials. The Americans, it seems, have grasped the concept's importance immediately. Meanwhile, Cambell and Boddington agreed to pool their participation in the project 50-50 and press ahead with trials. Both men are uniquely qualified. They're jointly responsible for the trials program of HMS Triumph, the carrier used for experimental work between training duties. They decide to keep the first test simple. Mark Triumph's flight deck with a landing path centerline set at 10 degrees to port. Since repositioning the arrestor wires isn't practical for these initial trials, the test is limited to touch-and-go landings with arrestor hooks raised. It's 1952 when Triumph steams into position
for the trials. Pilots approach the painted angled line, touch their wheels to the deck, then throttle up and climb away. Again and again, aircraft descend toward the canted marking, testing whether pilots can adjust to the new approach angle. The trials prove completely successful. The pilots are enthusiastic, reporting that the angled approach feels natural, even easier than the traditional straight deck method. They can see the landing area clearly throughout their approach, without the visual obstruction of parked aircraft. The angle provides better separation from the island's superstructure. Most importantly, they know that missing the wires no longer means certain collision with barriers or parked planes. But success in trials doesn't translate to Admiralty action. Despite news that the U.S. Navy's Midway trials mirror Triumph's positive results, the Admiralty takes no action beyond agreeing that the new scheme would be considered for a future generation of fleet carriers, which, in fact, are never built. The innovation that could revolutionize carrier aviation sits in bureaucratic limbo. Cambell and Boddington find themselves in a familiar position: proven concept, resistant institution. The Admiralty's caution reflects a deeper problem. Converting existing carriers requires structural modifications, shipyard time, and budget allocation during peacetime austerity. The urgency that drove wartime innovation has evaporated. Without dramatic demonstration of the angled deck's superiority, the Admiralty won't commit resources to wholesale fleet conversion. May 1953, the English Channel. USS Antietam appears on the horizon, and with her comes vindication. The U.S. Navy, whose midway trials had been similar to Triumph's painted line tests, has done something the Royal Navy wouldn't. They've acted decisively. In record time, American engineers prefabricated structural modifications ashore and installed them on this Essex-class carrier. Antietam now sports a true angled deck, not painted lines, but an actual port-side sponson extension, allowing full arrested landings on an angled surface. The Americans arrive with an extraordinary offer. Knowing the angled deck concept originated with the British, and apparently aware that the Admiralty is dragging its feet, the U.S. Navy sends Antietam to demonstrate the new technique. The offer is gratefully accepted. For 1 week, Antietam operates in the Channel with Royal Navy pilots participating fully. Aircraft thunder down the angled deck, catching wires, proving the concept works exactly as Cambell envisioned. Cambell and Boddington receive special invitations aboard. They're presented to the American officers and crew as the two inventors. The recognition feels surreal, honored by a foreign navy while their own service watches from the sidelines. But the demonstration achieves its purpose. Watching Antietam's flawless operations, seeing American and British aircraft land safely again and again, the Admiralty can no longer ignore reality. The success of Antietam's visit finally persuades the Admiralty that retrofit action should start immediately. HMS Centaur, already in service, becomes the first British carrier equipped with the angled deck. Best of all, HMS Ark, then nearing completion, receives modifications too. Though given only a 5-degree angle instead of the hoped-for 10 degrees, Ark can use the new technique fully. Some years later, during a major refit, she receives a full 10-degree angle. The transformation accelerates. From this moment forward, all fleet carriers in all navies adopt the angled deck. The innovation that began with a sandwich lunch and a sudden insight becomes the defining feature of modern carrier aviation. While Cambell develops the angled deck, his colleague Nick Goodhart works alongside him in the same Ministry of Supply office, designing a complementary innovation. Goodhart's premise is straightforward. With faster jet landing speeds and the stability of tricycle undercarriages, pilots should be guided right down onto the deck using visual indicators. His solution is more complex and accurate than previous attempts with colored sector lights. Goodhart proposes a large mirror facing aft, reflecting a powerful light placed some 50 yards away. A pilot maintaining the correct 3-degree descent angle would see the reflected light aligned with a row of green datum lights on the mirror itself. Above the green line means too high, below means too low. The guidance is self-evident and constant. One problem emerges quickly: pilots need to see the light while still turning toward final approach. Cambell suggests curving the mirror laterally to solve this. Gyro stabilization becomes obviously essential to keep the mirror steady as the ship rolls. The very first trial happens right in their office, borrowing a small vanity mirror from their secretary, Miss Montgomery, and propping it at a simulated 3-degree angle. They stand a borrowed lipstick on end as the light source. Moving forward and downward, they find it easy to keep the lipstick reflection in view. The test works. Though Goodhart conceives the mirror landing device before the angled deck, the two inventions prove blindingly complementary. The Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough undertakes detailed design and construction. Introduction into the fleet occurs simultaneously with deck angling. From this moment, the traditional batsman with his ping-pong bats becomes obsolete. The results of these two fundamental innovations, the angled deck and the mirror landing aid, prove immediately apparent. Fleet carriers in both the Royal Navy and U.S. Navy convert rapidly. Ark Royal aims only 4 arrestor wires and 1 emergency barrier instead of 16 wires and 3 barriers. The weight savings and extra space allow more crew quarters, reducing congestion. Landing accidents drop dramatically by approximately 80%, meaning fewer aircraft losses, fewer spare parts needed, dramatically reduced costs. Most importantly, death and injuries to aircrew and deck handlers plummet. Confidence and morale surge throughout carrier aviation communities. Training costs drop as fewer pilots are lost to landing accidents. As experience accumulates with the new scheme, less obvious advantages emerge. New parking areas abaft the island. Added flexibility in relative wind speed and direction. Easier and faster deck handling, less wear and tear on commanders' nerves. The strains, dangers, and complications of using a carrier's forward deck for multiple simultaneous purposes vanish. By diverting the landing path away from the main parking and working area forward, Cambell and Boddington have fundamentally transformed carrier operations. A glance at the latest giant U.S. Navy carriers shows how fully this concept has been exploited. For Britain's Royal Navy, the story becomes bittersweet. The innovations are British, but the resources to fully exploit them are American. The United States constructs the large carriers and develops the powerful aircraft that become the world standard starting in the mid-1950s. Britain's carrier force gradually diminishes, though the Royal Navy continues operating carriers into the 21st century. Dennis Cambell's career continues upward. In September 1954, he became the first captain of the new carrier HMS Royal, commissioned in February 1955, the first carrier designed from the keel up with an angled deck. In 1956, he returned to the Admiralty as Director of Naval Air Warfare. His final appointment comes in 1957 as Flag Officer Flying Training at Yeovilton. In 1958, America awards him the Legion of Merit. Upon retirement in 1960, he's appointed Companion of the Order of the Bath. The innovation that began with a desperate sketch during a sandwich lunch has saved thousands of lives and revolutionized naval warfare. One pilot's crazy idea, dismissed by his colleagues, championed by a scientist, proven by Americans, and finally adopted worldwide, has cut carrier crashes by 80%. The angled deck, born from frustration and insight on an August afternoon in 1951, remains standard on every aircraft carrier sailing the world's oceans today.